Shabbat Shalom. Pierre Felix had a rough childhood. He spent his early years on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood that was rife with violence and gunfire. Both of his parents worked as hard as they could, but even holding down multiple jobs, they were barely scraping by. The family was always on edge. When Pierre was 7, his parents managed to save up just enough to buy him a bicycle. It was a big deal. He was so proud of that bike. He loved that bike. He rode it down to the park with his friends, and he was sitting there on his bike, just chatting and laughing and having fun, when all of a sudden he felt the barrel of a gun on the back of his head. And a low voice said that he should get up and walk away without looking back. Pierre knew better than to disregard those instructions. He got off of his bike and walked away crying, because he knew he was never going to see that bike again. And he knew his parents didn't have enough money to buy him another bike. And that's a scary thing to experience as a 7-year-old, let alone as an adult. After that, Pierre didn't want to go outside. He just stayed home. He was scared. He was afraid. And his parents made the decision that they were going to move out of the south side of Chicago, find somewhere safer to live. But they didn't really have the resources to move. They didn't really have the resources to access a much safer community, so they ended up on the north side of Minneapolis in another rough neighborhood, slightly better than the south side of Chicago. But Pierre felt better there. He made all sorts of friends, and he discovered this love of basketball. He and his friends would strategize about how to get close to the NBA stars they idolized. They had a couple of tricks. One was they used to call hotels where they knew NBA players likely stayed, and they would ask for Steve Kerr. Other NBA players they knew actually reserved rooms under their real names. And if they got through, and they got to talk to Steve Kerr or some of the other NBA players, then they would race down to the hotel and try to get as many autographs as possible. Pierre remembers being rebuffed by Michael Jordan once, who said, "I ain't signing nothing. You all should be home sleeping and getting ready for school tomorrow." He treasured that memory. They also came up with other strategies, not just stalking NBA players at hotels, but they came up with other strategies to get close to the basketball they loved. They would shovel snow or rake leaves or collect cans, whatever it took. They would work super hard, all of them together, and then they would pool their resources to buy one cheap ticket to a basketball game at the Target Center. They would pick a boy, and he would go in with that one ticket. He would go up all the way to the back, find his way to a side door, walk down the stairs, and open it for the rest of the crew. Then they would come back up. They'd go up to the upper decks because they knew security only checked tickets during the first half. They would watch in the upper deck, and they were delightful. They were cheery and polite and helpful. They would stand up there and watch the first half of the game, and then just after halftime, they would go down and find a seat for the second half. They were there so often, and they acted like they belonged so much that some of the security personnel thought they must be related to a player. At the end of a night, the end of a game, they would go back out that same side door they came in, only this time they would bring with them tape, bubble gum, paper, whatever they could use to try to jam up the door, so the next night they could just get in without a ticket. This went on for months and months and months. One night, though, things didn't go exactly according to plan. The door was jammed successfully. That wasn't the problem. The boys got in, they were laughing, they were walking up the stairs, they're almost at the top, and then they see there's a team of security guards waiting for them. They turn around to run back out, but just at the bottom of the stairs is another team of security guards waiting for them. And the boys are all thinking, oh no, this is it. They've got us. And the security guards just take them and say, we're taking you in front of the director of security. And these boys are thinking, oh no, what's worse, juvenile detention or mom and dad? And they're walking and they're walking and they're walking, and it's just silent, and they're just like escorted by this whole team of security guards. And they get to the main security office, and of course the director's not there. So they sit there in silence, waiting for their fate, surrounded by police and security, thinking the worst possible thoughts. And then the director of security, who is then Bob Goders, gets in. He walks into the office, and he doesn't say a thing. He just walks down the line, and he looks at every boy, one by one. And Bob is this tall man with these piercing blue eyes, and he's just looking one by one by one and not saying a single thing. Finally, he says, "These are the kids? These are the kids?" The boys are panicking. Instead, saying anything else, as was recently reported in The Athletic, Goders reached into his blazer and pulled out a stack of tickets, handing one to each of the boys. He said, "Stop breaking into this building and causing trouble. If you all want to come to a game, you don't have to do that. Come ask for me. I'll give you tickets whenever you want. You don't have to cause trouble anymore." It's mind-blowing. How is it that a director of security who has watched these boys break into the Target Center for months, who watched long enough to figure out how to set up security team at the top of the stairs and the bottom of the stairs to get them, how is it that he could respond not with a punitive punishment, not with anger, but just with, here's some tickets. Don't break in. Come watch basketball. As Goders shared with reporter John Krasinski, I could see Pierre was a good kid. He wasn't a guy that was going to get in trouble. He just didn't have the means to buy tickets. I guess I just felt for him. This week we're reading Parshat Mishpatim. After the revelation at Sinai, after God says, "I love you, I see you, I want to have this partnership with you," God lays down the law. And these rules aren't given over with conversation. It's not like, when you enter into the land, if you're feeling so inclined, please feel free to celebrate. And when you enter into the land, if your hearts are warmed, please join me in doing the following things. No, they're like, this is what you will do. You will do it or else. It's all black and white. It's rule, it's clarity. And what's so interesting is when the people get this law that doesn't really take into account their feelings, their reality, their lived experience, they say, "Na'aseh v'nishma." In other words, they say, okay, we'll do it. Whatever you say, God, we'll do it. And then maybe sometime down the line, we'll understand why. So interesting about this approach, because this is so often the way that we engage with law in our world. It happens in lots of ways. We see that with law enforcement sometimes, that they get so focused on the law, on the rules, on enforcing policy, that they lose track of the people in front of them and end up using excessive force, causing harm, getting in trouble. We see this also in classrooms. I was talking with a family recently. They have a child who is extremely creative, and creative in math, which you don't always see. And this child got sent home with a worksheet and a methodology for how to do the worksheet, and the child came up with an alternate way to do the math, and it worked. They did the math in their own way, and they got all the right answers, and they brought it back into their teacher, and they were so proud, and they turned it, and the teacher gave them a 0. Why? Because Na'aseh v'nishma, the teacher was teaching them a methodology. This is how you do the math. They didn't do the math in the right way, thus the teacher failed them for that worksheet. We've all had experiences with this, moments in our lives where we've become so attached to what is right that we lose track of the moment. Now, don't get me wrong, Na'aseh v'nishma has its strengths, right? If you are just following the law, you don't have to invest a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy into thinking about, what should I do? I just drove up to a red light. Should I stop? Is it safe? No. You just follow the rules. And that frees up your energy and attention to focus on the things that matter most. But there's another way to encounter law. And that's a style that's revealed in the book of Vayikra. In the book of Vayikra, God says, Ushmartem et chukotai ve'et mishpatai asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem. You shall guard my laws and ordinances, and you shall live by them. Now this verse goes on to become very important in rabbinic thought, because the rabbis realized there are moments when our laws, when following the rules, could actually endanger our lives. For example, on Shabbat, there are cases where someone's life may be in danger, and in order to save that life, you have to break the laws of Shabbat. The rabbis use this verse and say, Chai bahem, you have to live by laws. Don't just interpret them narrowly, don't just accept them as is. Be always and constantly aware in every moment that you are an agent of that law, that your mental capacity to analyze the situation is required. And when necessary, you must be creative in your interpretation and application of that law so that you and everyone around you can live by that law. Now, if we observe law in that way, chai bahem, that's a very different lived experience. That means we love and appreciate the rules that exist around us. But that also means that we never have permission to go on autopilot. We never have permission to just do without thinking. We must always be evaluating, always be considering what application of the rules will create the greatest potential for life. What application of the values that I've inherited in my legal tradition will help me to see the person in front of me, to value their lived experience and to lift them up. That's what Goders was holding in that moment when those boys got marched into his office. He had the rules. You can't break into the Target Center and go to a basketball game without a ticket. That's the rule. But he also saw these boys, and he knew that if they weren't in the Target Center hanging out watching a basketball game, they were going to be out on the streets of Minneapolis getting into trouble. He saw these boys, and he saw them cheerily helping in the aisles and being friendly and being respectful and appropriate. And he knew that he had the potential to enforce the rules in such a way that he turned them off forever, or that he sustained a relationship that he taught them to speak up for their needs, to do what's right in every moment. And because he lived the law v'chai bahem, because he lived the law in seeing those boys, in relating to them, he created this incredible friendship. Those boys came to the Target Center for years. They started talking with him, they started hanging out with him. When he was short on staff as they grew older, they became his most trusted security guards. By the way, they were great at finding anyone who tried to break into those games. They knew all the secrets to get into the Target Center. And Pierre, who was at the time the leader of those boys, he grew up first he worked as a loss prevention specialist at a department store, which he was uniquely qualified to do because he had learned from Goders how to see every person, how to regard them, how to understand them, and he was thoughtful in his application of justice. He also became a special education teacher because he loved working with individuals. He loved helping kids to exist within a system of rules in a way that supported them and their lived reality. But he also became crucial to the NBA. He started as a part-time security guard, but then over time he became hired as a full-time security detail, traveling with an NBA team. And when he was hired in this way, the NBA team, the NBA players, they cheered for him because he's so much more than a security guard. He has this way of being totally delightful, totally appropriate, and totally thoughtful, while at the same time maintaining law and order and safety for all of the players. So here we are, it's Shabbat Mishpatim. It's a Shabbat that invites us to think about how we inherit legal traditions and how we interact with the laws and boundaries that exist in our world. And we have two choices. We can go unconscious. We can do the na'aseh v'nishma move, that we're just going to go through the motions and sometime down the road we'll figure it out. It's easy now, but creates problems later on. Or we can invest ourselves in observing the laws in a way which brings us to life. Chai bahem. We honor and appreciate tradition. We honor and appreciate the moment we're in now. And we choose to combine those two realities in the way that will lift us all up. Laws are on the books. How you live with them, that's up to you.